Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your screens and our show, the CRMKonvos show. We are delighted that we have today Duncan Chapple in his experience and a lot of stories to tell about analyst relation, how you can perfectly groove it, how you can make it smarter, more effective, and with a lot of more benefit and fun. Having said that, it is my honor to introduce Duncan to you and the lovely audience, such as Duncan advises on how to evaluate and get value from research and analyst firms. As a former Ovum and former now analyst, co-director of the Analyst Observatory and current researcher at the University of Edinburgh, or the Edinburgh Business School, he brings both practitioner and academic perspectives to research quality assessments. He's a frequent speaker, therefore I know him, an international on international events, a book author, one of your customers, and a lot of LinkedIn contribution, and as an academic peer reviewer of research submitted to demanding scholarly journals, he assesses innovative research approaches. Professionally, he has evaluated hundreds of research companies while counseling technology companies since 1997. Welcome, Duncan, to our show.
It is wonderful to be here, Ralph. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It is our pleasure, to be honest. And unfortunately, my dear friend Thomas, who would have loved to join and have to share some of the fun, is still struggling after he had moved from Summermesh to Charleston and has been arriving early enough to join in, but his technician has given him an extra challenge, such as they do not know where the connection point has been gone. And unfortunately, this is challenging him for some more days. So as he wrote approx Friday, he will be more stable in the internet connection. So I can make rude jokes now on him with his internet connections instead of me in the, let's say, underdeveloped country, Germany, from internet to the rest of the world. Now, having said that, dear audience, please feel free to throw in your ideas, questions, suggestions on your favorite social media channels, such as the Facebook channels we are broadcasting live, or YouTube, or LinkedIn from Thomas' side, so that we have some of the ideas you would like to go for. And then I would start it off, Duncan, with what is the secret sauce you found over the years to create and keep good relationships between vendors and analysts and also journalists? That will be my starter.
Thank you. So this is an interesting question because the answer has actually changed a little bit. One of the things that I love with the work that I'm doing with the University of Edinburgh's Analyst Observatory is I'm somebody who used to be an analyst, as you mentioned. I've been doing analyst relations for a long time. But this research shows me where often I'm wrong, or where things are changing. And I think what we're seeing increasingly is a shift where it used to be that analysts would come in like a first date. It would be 100 first dates, you know.
Yeah.
Analysts would meet with vendors, and it's like a check-in, right? These are the things that vendors should normally do. What have you done this year on the things that I should normally ask about? And I think that reflected the way that, you know, in the last 5 years, we're in extremely discontinuous waters.
Yeah.
In the 20 years before then, we thought that we were in a discontinuous market, but we were not. Now we're in a discontinuous market. So this is the big change, yeah. That before we were in the situation where analysts were working really as market intelligence repositories in fast-growing markets, but in relatively stable markets where their domain expertise was a stable base that could grow. And now we're in this situation where vendors need to engage in a completely different kind of information exchange, and where analysts are very open for an information exchange, not only about what is going on in their market, but also about huge changes in buyer behavior. And these big changes in buyer behavior mean that analysts need to be producing very different research from the kind of research that they used to produce. The buying center is different, different people are involved in purchasing, vendors are involved much later, much later
Yeah.
buying process than used to be the case. And this means that analysts need to think not only about how their markets are changing, and I think individual analysts have got a good idea of that, but they need to change about how the potential audience for analyst research is transformed by the way that vendors are basically absent from the discovery stage now. And that's something that one analyst, even if they understand it, they can't change the way that their whole firm is working.
Yeah.
So this is what we were talking about last month at the Analyst Relations Forum that we hosted at the University of Edinburgh Business School. And it's a huge transformation that I'm very excited about, and we collaboratively as a team at the Observatory are still learning about.
And some of your fans already joined in. So welcome John Reed to the floor. And it's lovely to have him with you. And he is highly recommending your YouTube channel for ongoing stuff to dig in. And aside of his fabulous reads, he is regularly producing and joining and sharing to go into more depth on how things are changing. And you will recall, Duncan, that you have been mentioned very often when we had our analyst panel, that Sarita, when she was joining in, was making quotes of the IIAR, such as did Ludovic Forestier and some of the other colleagues. So that is a topic which is delivering a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of challenges, such as how to communicate, how to treat each other with respect and with empathic type of understanding, such as
Absolutely.
what is your first take on how you would love to be treated as an analyst by a vendor before we go into some more interesting questions and different topics we'd like to talk about? Treatment.
Well, I mean, I would say, I think there's two parts of this. But one is, how would any analyst want to be treated at any time?
Yeah.
And then secondly, how do analysts have new challenges, and what do vendors need to do to engage with these new challenges? I think it's fair to say that most initial interactions that vendors or service providers have with industry analysts go very badly wrong, because there's such a mismatch. There are a huge amount of misunderstandings about pay to play. We're in a very challenging market also, where there is a lot more pay to play type pressure from analyst firms, from their salespeople primarily, than used to be. But where there's a lot of continuity is that when I was an analyst, vendors were not very interested in me. They weren't very interested in my clients, and they weren't very interested in the problems that my clients were trying to fix. But actually, the only thing that I cared about was the problems that my clients were trying to fix. My background is in the application of machine learning for enterprise applications. So I know a lot about machine learning, about artificial intelligence, quite a lot about enterprise applications. But I didn't really know a lot about the problems that clients are trying to fix using those things. Yeah. And I didn't, and I found myself within a couple of weeks of starting at Ovum, working with Bank of America on a huge project where they were trying to integrate a series of credit card systems from banks that they had admired. And I owned a credit card at the time, and I was familiar with databases, but I was kind of out of my depth. But luckily, I had a lot of resources at Ovum to pull on in that project. If vendors come to analysts starting from, what are the customer problems,
Mhm.
then not only are they helping the analysts the most, they are helping themselves,
Yeah.
because clients don't really care about how you do what you do. What they care about is really three things. Are you saving money? Are you improving quality? Are you accelerating growth? Like, these are the three meta categories of customer value. And if vendors don't start by speaking about that, then they're
Mhm.
showing that they don't really understand me and my clients. And that means there's almost instantly a dislocation where the vendor is very self-oriented. And I have not really thought through this first dates analogy that I used earlier on, but it's a little bit like being on a date with somebody who only talks about themselves and never talks about you or about what you have in common.
Yes. Very good comparison and a very vivid picture coming to my head, such as um, two streams of talking, but no one of listening. And that is
Yeah,
exactly the secret, such as we have to listen to our customers, to their challenges, and to deliver benefits, not other problems or new features. So,
absolutely.
coming from that end, you made a statement on it is very much from pitching to iterative storytelling to get into
Yeah,
that dialogue, which is more beneficial. How can
yeah.
analyst relation teams transition from the one of good old days pitches to continuous iterative storytelling?
Yeah. I think a lot of analyst relations programs are worse than they used to be, right? I think it's fair to say that for um, in the research that we do at the Analyst Observatory, what we've observed is a kind of, not exactly a winner take all phenomenon, but there's
Yeah.
something like a winner take all phenomenon unfolding, where the biggest vendors are a growing percentage of the interactions that vendors as a whole have with analysts, and that small and mid-size firms are shrinking as part of the total. And that means that for a small number of firms, they've got more repeated interactions, which means that you're building relationships. Yeah, it's true in analyst relations. It's true in marketing generally, that the more touch points you have, the more you know about something. You know, the more dates you go on somebody, the better you understand them. You may understand that you don't like them very much better, but you're definitely going to understand them better and understand where they fit, and understand where they don't fit. Um, what we've seen is that these most successful vendors, then it's not only the largest vendors who've got this relationship orientation, but they are doing very well. They are doing something fundamentally different from their sales pitches or their investor pitches. When people come along, as so many companies do, with traditional sales pitches, traditional analyst pitches, what they are not doing is they are not really focusing on the customer value that is being unlocked.
Yeah.
Yeah? Initially, when an analyst meets a vendor, you're starting the conversation at a relatively low level. What is the offer? Where do you fit in your taxonomy? What are you doing? How are you offering? How is it structured? And it's only when you've got that basic awareness that you kind of rise up to talk about business value and to talk about what you're doing for clients. And you want to leap up there as quickly as possible. You know,
Yeah.
again, the way on the day, you start off with small talk. What have you done today? But you want to move as quickly as possible to talk about what you share, the visions that you have in common. Um, if, on the other hand, you're just coming along with an off-the-shelf pitch, then you're not really getting into the part of the information that is most valuable for the analyst, and you're not really enriching the analyst's knowledge beyond what they already know. So you come along as an analyst. There's like a taxonomy. There's a set of boxes, a
Mm.
set of things that you're ticking off, critical capabilities, as Gartner calls them. You're looking at what the client, what the solution can do in various scenarios, use cases, as far as the talks about them. But that doesn't really help you to differentiate. What helps you to differentiate is genuine interest in the problems that the analyst is trying to solve, and that absolutely can involve challenging their assumptions. I met. I was telling you before we started the webinar. I met earlier today with a senior analyst located here in Munich, where I am, and he's an absolute expert in one of the markets that I work
Mhm.
in. But he's not an expert in this particular industry where I've
Mhm.
been building a lot of expertise, and where things don't work in the same way in that vertical market, the way that they work in other markets. And that doesn't mean that, you know, it works this unusual way in this market. It doesn't mean he's wrong about the whole market. It doesn't mean he's wrong about it, but it means in this particular space something is different and intriguing, and it may generalize into other markets. So I'm not exactly contradicting him, but I'm challenging that his general assumptions, which are true, are applicable in every market, and that
Yeah.
produces a memorable interaction, thoughtful disagreement, a little bit of intellectual freedom, so it was intellectual friction, but I'm positioning myself on the same side of the table. I am here to help his clients.
Yeah.
He is here to help his clients. So let's work. We don't have to all agree with everything because not every client needs the same solution. And that is
And
what allows you to change from these mechanical pitches to storytelling that is geared around customers.
I would like to show again one of the reflections and shared comments from John, centering the dialogue on customer problems is the core of his personal fields on, and where the thesis, the future of analyst relation will be. And he also was sharing that the commercial aspects, the commercial game on the analyst side,
Yeah.
and the analysts as PR mouthpieces on the vendor side are both obstacles to the future, such as if you do not have your 40,000 plus US dollars, you will not be in my quadrant. Oops, what did I say? Yeah. Just out of own experience with my former Austrian employers, which have changed their names several times. So I'm not afraid of saying this. And it is as the other user said, the understanding, it is Mark Chapple, to be precise, MSc, even UK National Audit Offices advocates intelligent customer and intelligent suppliers. Sorry, I have to look to the other screen to make that happen. And he has done even that quote, which I just made. So that is interesting. And is he in any way related to you, as the last name is written similar?
It's a very rare, anyone spelt with my name spelt this way is bound to be a relative.
Okay.
I mean, it's absolutely right. You do need intelligent suppliers, and you need intelligent
Yeah.
providers. But moving into not just being intelligent, but being in a conversation where you have like
Yeah.
iterative feedback, yeah, where you are learning from each other. And this point that John was making about, well, also that you were making about the kind of pay-to-play side of
Yeah.
analyst research, is the research that's produced from pay-to-play generally is not very useful for buyers. So I'm working on at the Analyst Observatory, we're working on a project at the moment where we're interviewing very extensively interviewing buyers in Fortune 1000 companies. Right? Their problems are absolutely not solved by that kind of research. Yeah, so like
Okay.
vendors are absolutely obsessed with product evaluations, for example. But what buyers need are tools that help them to navigate around their challenges. Yeah. So if vendors are actively soliciting feedback about what is happening in the market and are contributing their ideas about what they are seeing in the market, then you're building a relationship, and both sides of this relationship are not just going to be able to evolve their narrative, they're going to be able to change better what they do to help customers. And the other thing that I should just say is take notes and remember what you said. That's the other thing that I experienced as an analyst, and that I've seen a lot as an analyst relations professional, is on the scholarly side of things, we call this narrative archaeology. Yeah, you need to document what you've said, which is working, and what you've said that is not working, and the same from the analyst. Understand what provokes resistance. Understand what you don't like. Yeah, just being attentive in that way to the topic of the conversation helps you to shift from that one-off mechanical machine to storytelling that is going to be useful for buyers.
That's fantastic. Especially if I ask myself, in what way can the storytelling be adapted to reflect real-time market shifts and analyst feedback loops?
That is surprisingly difficult, right? There's a huge amount of information available.
Mm-hmm.
Not all marketing teams are well enough plugged in into the product side of their business. They very often organizations sell indirectly. They have a indirect sales channel, or their solutions are implemented by systems integrations companies. Very often there's a lot of information that might be shared with investors that might technically be available, but it's so hard to work your way through that neither industry analysts nor marketing teams are looking at that. But it's really not that hard if you are curious and you move out in your own organization to look for stories. And then these stories that you can, these changes that you observe in the market, you can feed them back to analysts in ways that can work at a very high level, like helping analysts to understand how their taxonomies need to change. Taxonomy, no vendor thinks they're going to benefit from taxonomy management, but actually you can really have a big impact if you can change the way that an analyst views the structure of an entire market, if they restructure it the way that you align with the market. And that's very powerful thought leadership if you can get into that. Anything that you can do to better understand the structure of the market, to share customers, to share customer stories. It's easier to digest. It's more friendly. It's much more humane, and it allows you to, if you need to adapt your stories, it allows you to continually do that by relating it back to the real world. And to say, well, we don't do this. We've exited that market. We've introduced this new product, but it allows you to present any necessary strategic shifts that you've made, any restructuring that you've made, by locating it in market shifts and the feedback you're gaining from the market, which makes you look like winners, even if you're retrenching or restructuring.
But we will be back. That is more to say, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back, that our broadcast will be back. So this gives me the opportunity to give a warning to our audience that we have this time a challenge and the caveat of the man has to catch a train. So we will stop 20 minutes to 8 instead of to the full hour, so that he has enough time not only to run and get his suitcases, but as the heat is on, to say so, in Munich, that he has a fair opportunity to catch his train. So having said that, I would love to jump in that you have a lot of research done with colleagues, such as in the 2024 and 2025 forums at the Edinburgh Business Forum and the Business School, and you had that analyst summits there. So where do you see the differences, even looking back to earlier years, to yet the situation today? What are the game changers, or especially specific to be mentioned observations from your end?
A very useful metaphor for us is the hype cycle, and we all visualize that hype cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, think of it like a roller coaster. When you are struggling with a high gradient, you need more hype, more energy in order to build momentum. Yeah. So then you need enough momentum to get you out of over the top, or you need momentum to get you out of the dip, but not so much momentum that you fly off the rails and crash into space. So I think
Yeah.
what we're seeing is that markets are in very different moods. Yeah. So firstly, that there's this change that I said in the way that buyers are using material differently, but then different markets are in different moods. Some markets are in a very good position. You know, anything to do with AI is in a very, very good market, but other markets are in a very difficult challenge. And
Okay.
I'd say that shifting towards genuine honesty about what is going on in the market
Yeah.
is very important. I'm seeing people concretize that honesty by doing things like looking at joint market intelligence
Yeah.
opportunities, looking at thought leadership partnerships, ecosystem orchestration is so incredibly important. If I had more time, I'd talk about digital transformation world with the TM Forums event that they host in Copenhagen. I wrote a blog post about that on LinkedIn. I think it gives an amazing example of how organizations can kind of rise with the tide of markets or work against them, and really try to preview your innovation as much as you can do, and use your interactions with analysts as much as possible to show how things are moving in the market, what you're doing, but what your customers are demanding.
You said there are some markets at risk or they are challenged. Which are those in specific which you observe?
I'd say any market with a high minimum economic scale,
Yeah.
and where your market and where the ability for you to generate additional revenue through additional investment is limited. So straight away, think about telecommunications.
Yeah.
In telecommunications equipment in particular. Telecoms operators, I think that they're not in a great situation, but they're not in a terrible situation.
Yeah.
Terrible telecoms operators, some of them are able to grow revenue, some of them can grow profitability, but they are pushing back their operational spending as much as they can do. Often there are some very peculiar I'm trying to think of an alternative word for manipulation, but let me say there are some really interesting discussions happening and choices being made about which things you
Yeah.
present as operational investment, which things you present as capital investment. Anyone who is selling something that is very expensive and produces minimal short-term incremental growth in revenue is obviously seeing their sales cycle decelerate. Yeah. I'm seeing people who've actually shifted from capex to opex and opex to capex being quite
Mhm.
unpredictably successful in different parts of the market. But I'd say high interest rates and limited incremental revenue growth mean that organizations that have got expensive stuff, they're definitely in a very troubled market at the moment. And anything where you can link to either immediate business value or, of course, strengthen the management's rhetoric about growth in the future. You know, maybe you're running a supermarket and I can sell you generative AI, and maybe that
Yeah.
will not really help your supermarket to be very effective. But if your CEO can mention it in the quarterly earnings call that generative AI is going to help them next quarter, maybe the supermarket is going to buy that, even if it only helps them to strengthen their story and doesn't really help them to sell more vegetables.
You mentioned already that we are not only in the storytelling and iterative storytelling and learning from each other, but that we are redefining the value in a dynamic market. So
Yeah.
value is the new currency, to say so. So respecting each other, going to a certain type of honest talk and honest information exchange might be one value. Could you dig in a bit more in the last 10 minutes into redefining value in that dynamic marketplace.
Absolutely. I think there are essentially two elements, right? One is customer value and the other is the value that you're giving to analysts.
Mm-hmm.
And then the glue in the middle
Yeah.
is in a way analyst value, how far the vendor is helping the analyst to develop more value, right? What are customers doing at the moment? The same three things that they've always done, right? They're trying to improve quality. If they can improve quality, then that will cut cost, but anything else that will cut cost will help them. And if you can improve quality and reduce cost, then you're reducing growth bottlenecks, and that will enable growth. So these are the three things that people are focused on. And the balance is a little bit different. In many industries, people are a little bit more focused on controlling cost than they are on dealing with growth bottlenecks. But very few vendors are struggling there, structuring their narratives around those things, and anything that they can do to help analysts to understand how they are delivering that kind of value to customers is going to help. Then, if we think about the value that vendors can deliver to analysts, there's understanding the market, there's personal coaching on their own lives, their own careers, the way that they can understand the world around them. And there's the amplification of the analyst. Yeah. So if you've got an analyst who's saying nice things about you, there's a certain background level of profile that they have. You can boost the analyst above their background level and make them more prominent. And then the third thing is, how can you make the analyst more valuable to the client, right? So help them to understand what is the kind of information that your clients, that buyers, can't get that they need. So a great example of that is the way that reviews, customer reviews, analyst firms are collecting customer reviews, buyers are using customer reviews, but I know, reviews are a nightmare, right? Reviews are data, right? I mean, they're relationally structured, but they're data, they're barely information, right? There is some information, the stars and so on, and numbers and so on, but it's very low quality information, but buyers are hungry for it, even though it is barely structured data. Right? It's a punishing indictment of how weakly analysts' insight is structured to meet the needs of people in buying centers, that people are consuming this base data rather than being able to find usable insights. And so few analyst firms are producing RFI templates, buyer's guides. Very few analysts are aware of what is the buying cycle, what is the life cycle of the technology, and what are the jobs to be done that business people have when they're dealing with this solution through its life cycle, not just through the buying process, but after the buying process. And if vendors who know this because of all the research they do into buyer personas, if buyers could share this, if vendors could share this information with analysts, they would not just be helping analysts to help buyers, they would be helping the buyers to better understand their own solutions. They would be helping buyers to act more confidently. So that's the way that we need to shift value creation.
Yeah, that's an important aspect. And it is very valuable, yet you mentioned that, and our audience is vivid, and I cannot share, as time runs, all the precious comments we have seen, also mentioning some of our friends in the AR industry like Ludovic Leforestier, and some of the known persons we will have next week. So I make also the pitch to our next CRMKonvos with the analyst panel, where we can continue, as we unfortunately have only 5 minutes left. So I would like to give you a pick on all the questions I have prepared as 20, where you would love to answer or make a specific pitch before I jump into the question where we would like to do the wrap up. Is there one question in specific you would like to focus on in the last 5 minutes?
Well, I think operationally for analyst relations people, the key challenge is really measurement.
Yeah.
measurement, because we're if you're in a car, you've got various instruments on your dashboard,
Yeah.
and you really need them.
Yeah.
But none of them tell you whether you are getting closer to your destination or not if you're driving in the wrong direction. Yeah. So there are operational metrics, and you absolutely need to collect those. It would be really weird if you were driving a car and you didn't pay attention to whether you had fuel, or
Yeah.
to whether you were moving forward or not, right? It would be really weird to not have those operational metrics. But the closer we get towards understanding value to analysts, we need different kinds of measures. So, I mean, a concrete example I would give: I've been working largely on the HubSpot platform.
Mm-hmm.
I was previously working at CC Group, which is a public relations, which is a cult to HubSpot, hiding as an integrated marketing company. You know, they
Mm-hmm.
are squeezing every piece of value out of HubSpot. I'm doing the same where I am. And you can build up engagement scores that allow you
Mm-hmm.
to score offline and online interactions. They give you an
Mm-hmm.
idea of how rich the relationships are. This is classic CRM. But very few people are really evaluating the depth and the quality of their relationships, and how
Ha.
far, yeah, and how far they are building relationships with people, offering thought leadership to people, rather than getting mentions. Yeah. And then similarly, like following that all the way through to understanding how analysts are impacting on the sales cycle. Yeah. To be asking your clients. So, for example, at the University of Edinburgh, we've been doing this analyst value survey where we ask the users of analyst firms, which analyst firms do they use, for what, and how valuable do they find them to be. And we see that investors in analyst firms are very interested in that. Like people in you think IDC is probably coming up for sale again this year. Anybody who might be involved in that transaction is very interested in the analyst value survey. But actually, vendors are not very interested in finding out which analyst firms are being used by their clients. They assume that it's the same as it was 10 years ago, same as it was 20 years ago. So getting the metrics right, that is going to solve all the problems, I would say.
And it is very much that I take your point, as recently Dennis Wakabayashi did some research in the cultural environments where he, for instance, analyzes in some different worldwide areas how the local approach of going forward with CX and how the wrong metrics are measured. So such adjustment of adjusting the metrics you would like to measure to deliver real benefit to your existing and upcoming customers would be a smart move. 1 minute left. I would like to ask you, what is your advice for startup or small organization not yet into AR, how to start and grow in that field of communication?
I would say do not spend a huge amount of money with the most aggressive analyst firm that calls you the most. They will break your heart, and it will ruin everything that you do with analysts. Just start having conversations. Yeah. Tell them what you're hearing from your customers, and ask them what they are hearing from customers like yours. And if they are not hearing from customers like yours, move on to the next analyst.
That is fantastic. It is now 15 seconds that you are on the move. So a little promotion. Thank you very much for joining in the CRM Convo today. The not yet more than a bit more than 30 minutes have flown by like dynamics and my little rocket, which is always with me. So thank you very much, Duncan, to our guests. Thank you for joining in and having that vivid conversation again with our reliable friend John, who joined in, and a lot of others, which I could not put on the screen today. Thanks, Duncan, for your time and insight. And please tune in next week when we dive into analyst relation with our famous AR panel to discuss. And if you would love to join in, Duncan, feel free to do so, and have a fantastic trip to Italy, to Florence, and to Genoa, and enjoy your time. And so we are going backstage, and for you it is up, run, and catch your train.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
So here we go. The stream should have ended.